Hi, everyone. We are Disabled in Grad School, and we're here today to talk about academic ableism and the way that it impacts our life as students of higher education. My name is Nicole Schroeder. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Virginia, and I study the history of disability, medicine, and welfare in early America. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kate Kirby. I am a PhD candidate in biological sciences where I study mitochondrial DNA copy number regulation in worms. I'm really passionate about teaching and about making learning accessible to all kinds of learners. In my spare time, I'm working on a project related to disability in grad school. And I joined Disabled in Grad School to highlight the inaccessibility of higher ed. And so I'm excited to be here and to be able to have this conversation about academic ableism. Crystal, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Crystal. I am a PhD candidate at the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. I study atmospheric chemistry, so I study how air quality is affected when urban pollution travels towards more natural areas like forests. I also do a lot of advocacy surrounding disability, both online and at my school. For instance, I started a student group that has focused on disability because as someone who became disabled in the middle of grad school, I just found that the differences in my experience were quite jarring. And I think that academia can just do a better job. So Caden?
Hi, I'm Caden Stockwell. I'm a PhD student also at the University of Virginia. I study developmental psychology, specifically looking at how autistic people interact with other autistic people and with non-autistic people, and also how autistic people are perceived by others. And the reason I got involved with disability in grad school is the first time that a professor shared with me that they were autistic, it was whispered, it was a secret, it wasn't to be talked about. And I'm always told that I shouldn't talk about my disability if I want to be taken seriously as a researcher. And so that really impacted how I navigated undergrad and how my identity is kind of developed. And I want to sort of talk about ableism at different points in careers and how that has changed as I've sort of become more involved in disability advocacy.
Okay, so I think for all of those who are tuning in, we should just make it a point to define what we mean by academic ableism, because it could be a new term for some people. So in my view, academic ableism exists on a full spectrum, right? It can go all the way from microaggressions, which might be like talking about productivity norms, to actual acts of aggression and actual acts of discrimination on campus. So could you guys flesh that out a little bit and give me some examples so our viewers can understand better?
Yeah, so, sorry, I guess I'll go. Yeah, so it's this whole spectrum, and I also want to emphasize that one thing isn't necessarily worse than the other. They all pretty much suck. So some examples that I've personally dealt with is just saying, like, you can't participate because I happen to have mobility issues and they thought it might be a safety issue. And then on the other end of the spectrum is saying, we will just make the lab more accessible when you need it to be, rather than proactively deciding that it should be accessible because you never know who's going to come into your lab and who will need these kind of accommodations.
Yeah, some of the examples that come to mind pretty quickly for me is sort of the expectations of like work time or work location, in terms of a lot of times to be successful in academia, people talk about working really long hours or, you know, far more than your typical 40-hour work week, or you know, much beyond this sort of what people think of as a typical 9 to 5, and that you must be like in lab or in your office on campus doing work for that straight period, when not for all studies, but a lot of times the work could be done in other locations that are more accessible to you.
Yeah, I think it's especially as a bench scientist, I've gotten a lot of these messages about how much time I'm expected to be at the bench, and how a lack of meeting those expectations demonstrates that I lack passion, and there's this like connection in some people's mind between how much time you spend on your work or that you spend in lab as an indicator of how interested you are in your work. But that's a very ableist concept, that like my presence in the lab indicates anything about my interest. And there might be reasons that passion might look like it's flagged when it hasn't, but there are also many reasons why passion might flag over the course of a 5 or 6 year PhD. That's a really long time to just be committed to one continual project. And for anybody, it's reasonable for your passion to kind of wax and wane. And the expectation that that is just the norm, and any argument against that is perceived as a laziness or as trying to get out of having to do work, has really been, I think, the most prevalent aspect of academic ableism in my life and in my experience.
Yeah, I think those performativity expectations are pretty much the same in the humanities. So like when I go conduct archival research, it's expected that I sit there all day translating my documents, even though I could do that at home, right? Or it's expected that I show up and I do work in the grad lounge, because otherwise, like, clearly I'm not doing labor, even though professors are not inhabiting those spaces, right? So I feel like academic ableism is upheld on a lot of different levels, right? Our students might uphold certain performativity expectations they have of an educator, right? Which means that if I don't stand up to speak in a classroom, am I maintaining the conversation, right? Or if I don't dress in a certain way, am I maintaining productivity and performance expectations? I think it's like rooted in classism and sexism and a lot of other intersections, right? When we talk about ableism, it doesn't exist within this like perfect vacuum. It builds off of other forms of oppression, and it extends obviously across the disciplines.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been interesting to think about how my perspective has changed from like when I came into college as an undergrad, and thinking and sort of holding a lot of these ideas of time spent and time being tied to interests or locations as being pretty normal and okay. And then as I've met other disabled people in academia, sort of like my perspective has definitely changed a lot from when I started college.
Yeah, so I became disabled year 3 of grad school. And back then, it was very much like I can't take a break because I need to be in lab. Because if I'm not in lab, then my advisor or whoever is going to judge me, and then I won't be seen as like the ideal scientist. And it took a lot of time to shake that, mostly just by getting to know more disabled people. Many people aren't out at my school, and we're also quite a small school in general. But even now, I still have to fight the temptation to be like, oh, I need to power through, or I need to work through this thing because of some deadline, even though, to be honest, most of the deadlines I have right now writing my dissertation are completely arbitrary. So I actually don't have to meet any of them, really. And I also, like, one thing I found in this transition between the years was that I kept thinking back to when I was quote unquote able-bodied, and how I was like, well, I earned this rest because I did all of this work when I was able-bodied. And that is a lot of internalized ableism, for one, but also just not, you deserve this rest. You deserve to take care of your body. And I still get my work done. I don't know.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with my disability in undergrad. So I kind of have lived in both worlds, right? Like I had accommodations as an undergrad and they were actually effective because they, right? Like my professors were willing to provide them. I had flexible deadlines, I had excused absences. I went to a really small liberal arts school. I like felt comfortable talking to my professors and like catching up in classes that I missed in office hours. And I expected those accommodations to be helpful in grad school, and they just aren't at the same level that they used to be as an undergrad. Because suddenly there are work expectations that go beyond like my scholarly productivity, right? Like it's not just about output. If it was just about output, then I wouldn't have a problem, right? Because like my CV is fine. And I think that like the performativity that we expect of undergrads and then that we expect of, grad students, faculty members, postdocs, that there's just such a huge change, but there's no change in the way that we accommodate people, right? We expect that the same structure that works for undergrads is going to work in grad school. And that's just, I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? Because normally we would be going to HR as employees. Normally we would be talking about what accommodations look like, but we are neither really employees nor students. We're caught in this in-between moment, and accommodations haven't really been realized for us, right? So I feel like academic ableism is pervasive in that the only things we are offered are things we can't even take advantage of, right? Because like, what does an excused absence mean if you have to teach that night, right? There's like, that means your students don't get taught. That means they're not getting what they paid for. That means that like, it's going to reflect in your like student reviews at the end of the term, right? Like there are serious concerns. So I feel like the pressure to just like push through and perform regardless is there because there hasn't been anything else imagined.
Yeah, I had a fairly similar experience to you, Crystal, where I mean, I've been sick my entire life, and we just sort of like didn't really know what was going on. And it wasn't until I was in my PhD program in my third or fourth year also that we finally figured it out. And it took so long, partially because the medical system is a disaster, and we could have hours long conversations about that. But part of it was because the never take a break, productivity focused perspective meant that I was ignoring pain that I was in a lot. I did a lot of blaming myself, that I thought that maybe if I ate better, then whatever weird thing was happening in my gut would go away. And it's my fault that I'm eating poorly. And it's my fault that I'm eating poorly because I'm not managing my time well enough, because I'm in lab all hours. And so like, it just became this cycle of kind of blaming my own self. And then thinking that like, I just need to be working harder or working smarter or working better. And that has taken so much effort to be able to like work past emotionally, that like, if I hadn't been a part of this ableist system, that maybe I would have gotten treatment significantly earlier and my life would be on like a different trajectory right now. But I also think that this concept of like allowing yourself to take breaks because of the work that you've done is exactly how it was presented to me, that like I shouldn't be taking a break. I shouldn't be sitting down or standing up or whatever thing was better for me at the time, because I haven't gotten the work done. And I tried to explain spoon theory at some point before we had figured out my exact diagnosis. I knew that there was some sort of chronic illness thing happening. And so I tried to explain spoon theory and explain that things that are easy or that don't require energy for other people are requiring huge amounts of energy for me. And I was basically told that, well, if that's the case, then I shouldn't be doing anything else besides my research, that I shouldn't be doing any advocacy work, and I shouldn't be doing really anything fun. I should be, if I have 4 good hours every day, then those 4 good hours have to go exclusively to research and no fun things at all. And the fact that people even thought that that was an okay thing to say to me, that like the ownership that suggests that these advisors and mentors and other people have over my life and my time simply because I'm a graduate student is ableist in nature, that they somehow have the knowledge about how I should be spending my time. And so early in the beginning, I sort of tolerated that. But as Crystal pointed out, as I sort of built more of a disability community, and I read more about ableism, and I read more about people's experiences of just not being able to work so much, I realized that just because that's what everybody else believes, that doesn't mean I have to buy into it too. And in fact, that means I should be railing against that even harder, hence my involvement with all of you wonderful people.
Yeah, I think it's really, really hard when like your colleagues are all upholding this like code of standards, right? And you feel like you're the only one breaking that code. Where does that leave you? Like in your cohort, in your field, as like a mentee? I think that's like a really tough position to be in. So I came into grad school and I already knew that I was disabled, and I had a okay disabled identity. I had worked through some internalized ableism, but I was also like a first gen student. So going to grad school, I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know what was acceptable to ask of someone, right? And I felt like at that intersection, like I was questioning my identity a lot and saying like, is this because I just don't know the system? Do I not know how to like thrive in it? Or is it because I'm disabled, right? And like now I can look back and be like, oh, this was just ableist and you didn't need to do that or hold yourself to that standard. But I think at the time when I started in my cohort, like the rest of my cohort is largely able-bodied, or they do not talk at all about how their disabilities impact their research or work. And that is a really tough place to be, like the only person who's out that you know, right? Like it's just lonely and really hard. And any time that I brought up like ableist conceptions to them, it was kind of like, well, that's, you just don't like it, right? Not like there's a problem, it's inaccessible. So I told a colleague of mine that like, oh, I hated going to conferences. And I didn't hate them because of like the research that's shown there, right? Like I hate them because it's like 12 hours, you're expected to walk everywhere you go, everything is standing room only. Like there's so many inaccessible points to conferences. And I was like, oh, I find them really draining and exhausting, and like the benefit isn't worth how sick I get from them. Mm-hmm. And my colleague was like, oh, well, I love them. Like that's not helpful to me that you love conferences and I just told you that it's a really inaccessible place for me. Like I'm never gonna love something that is not built for me, right? And you should love it. It was built for you, right? It was built for you with you in mind and with none of my access needs. And it's frustrating because my access needs are the access needs of so many other people, right? Who just have chosen not to engage with the academy or not to go to conferences because they know from the starting point that like these moments and events are inaccessible to them.
And that kind of reminded me of like kind of the difference between invisible and visible disability. So my disability is pretty invisible unless I'm using a mobility aid. And for a long time, I just never really bothered. And so the amount of time that I had to sit, especially in the first conference I went to afterwards, like, I don't know, you kind of just feel people are staring at you and you're like, well, why aren't you engaged? And I'm like, because I'm in a tremendous amount of pain right now, but I can't really tell you because it's not acceptable for me to say that. Mm-hmm. And then also like, I'm also a first generation student and a woman of color. And so I have all these other expectations of like performing and being like the best I can be, because I can't really be mediocre with my identities. And so it just becomes this really like between a rock and a hard place where you're like, I have these needs because of my body, but I also have these expectations that are unspoken and I have to meet.
Yeah, I also had a conversation with this PI who I was connected with because we both have the same chronic illnesses. And so a person was like, you should meet this person and you can have this like inspirational conversation. And so we had this conversation. A PI is a very successful PI, and basically told me that when she goes to conferences, she gets sick for days afterwards, but it's worthwhile to her, that it's like a worthwhile pain for her. And I expressed like, well, I don't really think that that's a worthwhile pain. Like that's not a trade-off that I want to make. And she encouraged me again that like, I think you can do this. I think you can be a PI at an R1 institution like I am. And while that's like totally her choice and like it's totally up to her to make those decisions, the idea, I mean, it kind of gets into like inspiration porn territory, right? Of like, because she can and because it's a trade-off that she's willing to make, it kind of becomes my responsibility to also make those same choices and to also put my health at risk to be able to go to these conferences when you're right, they're not accessible and there are consequences to your career for not attending these conferences because so much and networking happens at them. And I'm a person who stutters. And so even if we take all my chronic illness out of the equation, going in and being expected to network at these conferences where I like it's incumbent upon me to go and just waltz up to somebody that I don't know and start speaking and maybe not even really be able to get my name out before they're confused about what's happening and just walk away. Like that's a really challenging thing to have to overcome. And so I think it's incumbent upon our allies and colleagues to kind of help promote accessibility at all levels, including these kind of one-off conferences.
Yeah, a lot of what you said resonates a lot with me. I go to a large conference in my field every year that has a lot of researchers attend, but also has some self-advocates attend who are disabled. And there's been sort of arguments for years about ways to make the conference more accessible, and it's taken a lot of years and a lot of arguments to sort of start to get some of the bare minimum accommodations for this conference. And for me, I enjoy conferences, but I find particularly poster sessions extremely challenging because there's lots of people and lots of noise and it's very crowded. And so I can't do really the networking that often happens in poster sessions, or I can't understand the person when they're walking me through because I can't hear them well enough. And so a lot of people that I've worked with have sort of tried to kind of help me in this in terms of like recommending me to these sort of like networking workshops or sort of like advice on how to network better or to help me like sort of get over it by like practicing with me. And it's like a lot of the norms of networking and of conference interactions and professional interactions are very sort of based in neurotypical and non-disabled standards that no amount of networking workshops are really going to help me, nor necessarily should they help me with, helping in quotes.
Well, and again, as a stutterer, when there is external noise, if it's like very loud, I can totally tune it out. But if there are other people having a conversation adjacent to me, I cannot regulate my speech. There's something that happens in my brain where like processing that like auditory cue messes with my ability to create my own language. And so when I'm presenting at a poster session, it's almost impossible to be able to hear questions and be able to process my own answer while there are so many conversations going on around me. But it's never been offered to me that like we could maybe have fewer people in the poster presentation and have you present for like 2-hour chunks. Instead, I was at a huge C. elegans conference in this huge auditorium where there were hundreds of posters being presented at the same time. How can I possibly give a good presentation if I can't even, like if my brain physically cannot manage all the input at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's exhausting. The expectations that we're upheld to, right? Not just in conferences, but in a ton of different spaces, right? Like that's one poignant one where we all have bad experiences. But like, I think our mentors all expect us to have disabled mentors as well, right? Everyone says like, find a mentor who's not your direct advisor and they'll help you. And like, first of all, they're incredibly hard to find in the academy, right? And even though we know some are there, like whether or not they're out as disabled people on campus is questionable. And if they are, they probably have a visible disability and they had to be out, right? I've had a lot of trouble talking to disabled potential mentors who do not have the same politics as me. And I think that's true of any mentor, right? Like there's a whole diversity of opinions in the academy about how your personal life should influence your research and your work. And for me, they're like intimately tied together. My advocacy work is just as important as my teaching, as my research, as my like disabled identity. And I don't know that that is true of every disabled mentor, right? Like Kate, you said that a potential mentor told you to just like push through, right? And I feel like I've had that experience a lot too, right? I have written pedagogical guides to like how to be an ally, and other disabled people have said like, oh, people won't engage with this if you tell them that it's their legal responsibility to provide accommodations. And if we're not even starting at a point of acknowledging where the ADA influences your work as an educator, then where are we, right? Like how low can the bar be? It's dismaying.
But there's also like a huge survivorship of bias of like the people who are disabled PIs in the academy have just pushed through and have just like adapted to the norms because that's the only way that they've made it to that point. And like we haven't talked about statistics at all, but if you go to our Twitter dis in grad school, we do have those stats, and they're about 25% of the US population is disabled, but less than 4% of faculty are. And so that huge drop off is because of all of this academic ableism that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that one of the reasons that this is the case is because fighting all of that ableism like takes away from a lot of your like functional productivity and a lot of time away from your research. So like, for example, the thing that I couldn't go to because they thought I was a safety hazard was a field experiment. And I'm supposed to be able to fight that type of discrimination while also preparing for this field research thing that I don't even know if I'm going to go on. And also like helping my colleagues because I can't leave them hanging because this is a team effort. Mm-hmm. And like the headspace that you're in when you're facing these kind of things is just not great. and then you're just expected to just do it. Like, no one really thinks about, and this comes for all forms of discrimination, no one really thinks about how that affects the person, and they just expect you to be like, oh, well, I got through it, and then we'll just move on to the next thing, where like that experience and many other experiences have like stayed with me and have significantly impacted my decision to not pursue science immediately after my graduation.
Yeah, I think also another way that all this ableism impacts productivity is that there's a lot of documentation that is required to be able to get even some of these accommodations that like aren't even that useful that we've been mentioning. And like to get those accommodations, I mean, you have to go to doctor's appointments, which take time. I mean, even just scheduling a doctor's appointment can take time, but then you have to travel there. And if you go to a specialist, the specialist might be out of town or out of state. And then you have to go and you have to physically be at the appointment and you have to advocate for yourself at the appointment. And then you have to leave and you have to follow up to make sure that you've gotten the test results. And then the doctor has to write a letter. And often the doctor doesn't really know how to write this kind of letter. And so you have to write the letter for them and then they have to edit it and you go back and forth for a couple of rounds. And then you have to get that letter to the accommodations office. And then you have to pay for all of that, right? And so like on this measly grad student salary that we have to also pay for all of those appointments and for the travel to the appointments. And so like for me, I had to get another job, right? Like I had to do extra things outside of my normal expectations for research. And so now I have even fewer hours because I'm at all these appointments, but then I also have fewer hours because I have to pay for the appointments. And so if you just begin stacking all of it, and all of that is just to get a letter to prove that you need the accommodations that you need, right? And so like, if we could minimize this ableism and have our accommodations met by just the concept of universal design, then we wouldn't have all of that time spent and we could channel all of our energy that we want to. I don't mean all of our actual energy, but like all the energy that we want to commit to research could be committed to research instead of all the hoops that we have to jump through to just be able to physically be in a space.
Yeah, I think the emotional impact is so high that we all personally feel like we have to prevent this for someone else, right? So we have all taken up advocacy work because we feel like that's on our shoulders now as someone who has been through the system and been abused by the system. So advocacy work takes time, and normally it would be part of a professor's service to the profession. But as grad students, it's really just like, that's a hobby for you now. Like it's not a hobby. It is a lot of research and work, and like it's just as diligent work as my academic work, right? Like it's not easier by any means because it's so incredibly personal, right? It's weighing and it demands just as intense research or just as intense writing skills and even better interpersonal communication skills because you suddenly have to advocate for all of these younger students because you don't want them to go through the same process. And I wish that that was seen as, you know, part of your career, not like you'll make a good dean after this or wow, you'll make a good disability coordinator, right? Like it'd be nice if like I would make a good professor because of that.
Well, and like to just get meta for like 1 second, like we are currently filming a video about our experiences and we spent probably like between an hour and a half and 2 hours of time preparing stuff and question, like even just to make this short video, we had to spend all this extra time. And so it's not just simply us getting on here and just like venting for a little while. Like this actually requires time and effort to even just make this little kind of sassy video that we have here. And so our other more scholarly advocacy is even above and beyond that.
This doesn't even become a dissertation chapter, which I'm minorly bitter about. Like this isn't really, Sorry?
Is it gonna be a chapter?
It may be in the appendix. It is unclear if my committee will put it in the appendix. I haven't broached the question yet because it's terrifying, right? Like, like most professors are like, you're here to do science without any like thought of, well, do they want to continue doing science? Because if they don't, that's perfectly fine. But also like, what other things are these people dealing with that they feel the need to like advocate for? And so I'm like, this is just as cool as like, I don't know, all the field work I've done. Like I feel like I'm making at least a little bit of change at my school, or even just ranting on Twitter. But it like, if I wasn't going into possibly like DEI or accessibility, like none of this would count towards my CV. It would be like a line and that's it.
All right.
So if we've been doing, you know, a lot of this work ourselves because, like you said, we, you know, trying to make the world better for ourselves, for people who haven't entered higher education yet, or because we've been, you know, assigned to be our department's disability point person, as I know a lot of us are. Like, what can our non-disabled allies do so that all of this isn't on disabled people who, as we've said, already have a lot going on?
I mean, I think just from like a very basic point of view, like when you enter grad school, you are competing for jobs, but let's be honest, there are no jobs. So if we are going to be together for 6+ years as a cohort, it would be nice if our cohorts were supportive and like just listened, right? If you want to talk about ableism with your cohort, it's helpful if people don't try to necessarily fix things from an able-bodied point of view, but learn about your point of view, ask what they can actually do to help. Or sometimes it just like takes the form of saying, wow, that sucks, right? Not saying like, well, this is how you can fix it for yourself, right? Just acknowledging that like, this is trash is sometimes helpful, right? That's like the most basic thing you can do, is not tell a disabled person that they should take more labor on to fix this for themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think I want to plug our DIS in grad school's October month of actions. If you're watching this video after October 2020, you can go back in the archives and you'll find what everyone else has done. But if you're watching this during October 2020, like, our Twitter has all these actions every day. You can email your disability services office about things. We will write the email templates for them. You just have to add in info. And so like, that's like a big plug. I also think that like on the flip side of what Nicole just mentioned, like if you can take on labor for your disabled colleagues, like if you know that your disabled colleague has a doctor's appointment, like you can offer to, I don't know, pick their worms for them or whatever it is other people do in other labs. I don't know. But like just having like, not waiting for them to ask, but being proactive and offering like, hey, it seems like you're struggling a little bit right now. How can I best support you in this? How can I best help you out? Especially if you're in a lab with someone, because like you're literally a team. Like you want everybody in your lab to be moving the research along. And so like approaching things as a team and offering help when you can.
Yeah, I think one of the best allies I've ever had who's in my lab, they, like, I can just go to them and be like, I'm not feeling great. I know we have like this thing that we're doing together right now, but like if you can take on a little bit more, then when you're feeling really crappy, I will definitely like step up. And if we're feeling crappy together, then we can just complain about it for a little bit and, you know, get whatever we've done and then just say that we tried our best. Like that's an A+ ally right there.
Yeah.
This is very me specific, but it's sort of the attitude that counts. Was my advisor has a couch that is pink and plaid and very visually loud. And when I am looking at him sitting on that couch talking to me, I can only hear the couch. I have no idea what he's saying. And I felt ridiculous telling him that I can't hear you over the couch. He took that completely fine. It was fine, and we moved somewhere else, and now I never have to look at that couch again. But just accepting that you might not understand why I can't hear you talk when I can only hear the couch, but you can just accept that that is how it is for me and not make it a big deal and, you know, go sit in a less comfortable place for a few minutes to have our meeting and then go back to your couch.
I like really want that on a t-shirt. I can't hear you over the couch. Like I definitely, like we have to do that.
I just got a mentor because I'm in the Association of Writers program, mentor-mentee setup, which is lovely. And I specifically requested a disabled mentor. And in our first meeting, we were both like, I live on Crip time. These are my needs, right? My schedule might change. And this is how I plan my day. And these are the hours that could fit, but it would be nice to have like a backup time to meet in case that day is bad. And we were both like, yeah, I accept your needs and I'll be flexible, right? So like just asking someone like, how can I accommodate you, right? And phrasing it as I have accommodation needs too, right? I think able-bodied people don't think that they have accommodation needs, but a lot of the things that we do to make you comfortable about being able-bodied are an accommodation, right? Like the world you live in is accommodating to you, which is why you rarely have to ask for things at the university. But you do have needs, and like it's fine to articulate them and to respect the fact that everyone has needs.
Yeah, I have a colleague who like just takes constructive criticism about like social justice related things super well. And so for example, a long time ago, he used an ableist word that he didn't realize was ableist. And so I was like, hey, I don't think that you know this, but that word has this like connotation to it. It has this like a meaning that maybe you don't know it has, but when I hear that word, it makes me feel really bad. And so he was just like very responsive and said, okay, I didn't know that. I will not use that word again. Instead, I will use this other word. And it was just like so easy and so simple. And that just approach of like, I'm gonna learn about this and I'm not gonna take offense to being called out, I think was really helpful. And then it allowed me to not feel uncomfortable mentioning other times when it happened about other words or the pervasive productivity culture. I was able to sort of address that too, because I felt like there was a good response that I was expecting from him.
Related to that, I think if you're a non-disabled person who we feel comfortable like ranting to or being like, I had this really horrible ableist experience, maybe don't be like defending the person that we had that experience with, because like we've gone through all the scenarios in our head of how this person probably didn't mean like horribly and how they just are not aware of the situation or not aware of their internalized or externalized ableism. And so just being like, yeah, your feelings are valid. That I can see how that's pretty crappy from your perspective, and like that's it. That's all you need.
I also think allies are really, or good allies are really useful when they sort of take up the mantle when they see ableism happening. It becomes really taxing and really exhausting to have to, at every single meeting, raise your hand and say, hey, this is a thing that happened and was ableist, or at every single talk to be the one that asks, can you use a microphone, or can we turn the lights off because they're giving me a headache. And it's really nice when you have colleagues who will take up that mantle and they will bring up those issues. And so I think it does there is some work that falls on allies to know about what those issues are, and like what, like to be able to know enough to identify ableism when it's happening and to call it out. And so again, I'm gonna plug our actions again, because we have lots of information that will be coming out throughout the a month of October, that tells you a little bit about like how accommodations work and like what your responsibility is, and how you can help to make events and activities accessible at your university. And so the more that you as an ally read up on these things, the easier it will be for you to identify ableism when it happens and then step in. That way your really tired, exhausted researcher friend can go back to doing their research or go take a nap, whichever one they want to be doing at that time, and not have to advocate for themselves all the time, because I know I don't want to advocate for myself all the time.
Right. And I think like we've already in many ways had to do this labor, right? We all have like very particular disabilities. So I don't know how to make an event accessible for every person with a disability, right? That's still something I had to research and learn and write about and find sources on. That's not just innate. Like I didn't become disabled one day and like gain this sense of knowledge, right? It's work that we all do all the time. And part of that work is engaging with disabled people, right? Like on your Twitter feed, making sure you follow disability rights advocates, making sure that you talk to disabled people, becoming a little less awkward about talking about disability, treating it like a natural form of diversity, just like race, just like other minority categories, right? Like realizing that whether you're disabled, non-disabled, whether you want to think of yourself as temporarily non-disabled, right? Like disability is a natural state of being. You could someday be disabled. The sooner you get involved in the disability rights movement, right? Like the sooner that you are accommodating a broader like span of your students, right? If 20% of them are disabled, then like maybe you should care about a fifth of your students. That's a big number. And if you can do things that we're handing you, literally just giving you the resources to do, if you can read through those sources, that is a huge starting point that a lot of people don't even take.
I also recommend reading to the through the replies, because we'll be asking a lot of questions to the disabled community, such as how to be a good ally, and their responses can be really insightful. And then you're learning directly from the disabled people who need you to step up and like talk about all these things.
All right. So we've talked a lot about how our like direct colleagues can help us, but what about people who have more power in the university? Like what can we do on a broader, more institutional level?
Are they watching this video?
Oh my God, I doubt it. But sending up that Hail Mary. Let's see. Things that can be suggested, right? At faculty meetings, perhaps.
I mean, would you like my like wish list?
I want like your dream. Like what would a dream day be for you? Let's end with that. Like what would a dream day where you're accommodated in the academy, what would that look like?
Well, like I think first and foremost, I want every campus to have a disability cultural center. Every campus, you just like have a home there that you can go to, and you can walk in and just like lay on a couch. We'll make sure it's a quiet one, and then like nobody will bother you and ask you why you're napping on the couch or whatever it is. And hopefully in there would be some faculty who are studying disability, who understand that the experiences are varied, and that there's like a lot of history, and so like having that space on campus, I think would signal to me that disability is not just like tolerated, it's appreciated, and it's like seen again, as you mentioned earlier, as like a form of diversity, which it is. And like that would require the university to like funnel money toward disability, which is another thing on my wish list that like generally, well, I don't want to speak for too many universities, but I've read some numbers from some universities that the whole department of the entire Office of Disability Services is less than like one like high level administrator, like less than the salary that one chancellor or one provost or one, even just like one emeritus professor or whatever, that like the whole office makes less or has a budget of less than what one of these administrators makes an entire year. And that's supposed to handle hundreds to thousands of students. And so like the numbers just don't make sense. And so that's the reasons of my list. Would someone like to jump in?
Yeah, I would love a disability cultural center, like you said. I also love the Office of Disability Services or Accessibility or whoever is sort of handling your accommodations to not be a 20 to 30 minute walk from my office off on the edge of campus where nobody can find it. I would love for it to be, you know, in the student union where everybody can see it, where it's easily, where you can easily get to it, where it doesn't have to like cut out an hour plus of your day to like make what sometimes is a quick trip, but what sometimes also is a very long meeting. So I'd love for it to just be more centralized and not feel like it's an afterthought. Related to the budget, I would also love that office to get more money, because a lot of times you'll have students, you know, like us, who are trying to work with the Disability Access Center, you know, within the structure that exists at your university to, you know, work as efficiently as possible or to develop more programs. And you might have people working in the center who love your ideas and have great ideas and intentions, but are so overloaded that they have no time to implement these ideas. And when you have a student population, students leave. So if there's no sort of employed people trying to get these measures off the ground, then it's very much another burden on your student population that is constantly moving through.
On that point about the disability office being like almost off campus, I've heard lots of excuses for that, being that they want students to be able to come and go from the office without being identified as being going to the disability office, which just feeds into the stigma that a disability cultural center would exactly upend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, related to also that point of putting the office in like the student union, advertising it widely to your student population, sometimes it's just talked about in orientation and then you never hear about it again. And if you are like me or Kate, who like became disabled in the middle of grad school, specifically grad school, because I feel like grad school is an especially bad job of advertising this, then you're like, well, I now have all these accommodations that I probably need, but I have no idea who to contact or how to contact them or what forms I need. So advertising that somehow would be great. I would also just like see it integrated into the diversity centers to kind of remove that stigma. Also cultural center, like these things can be all one thing, like just like an affinity group or a culture center that is also tied with the diversity centers, then you can also handle a lot of the intersectional identities that come with disability.
Yeah.
I personally want to see like repercussions for professors, financial repercussions if you don't follow the ADA, if you have so many ADA violations as recorded by your students. Like, it's not just going to be in your student reviews. It's going to be actually talked about at faculty and staff meetings. It's going to actually have an impact on your tenure advancement. Like, if the ADA doesn't have any teeth to it, then I want universities to create those teeth. Brutal, I know. Demanding that people uphold the law at public universities.
How could you?
I know. How radical.
Yeah, I think also on that note, just having universities implement some of these accommodations proactively, like adding captions to video, putting some money so you can have captions on videos is not that hard. And like we've done it all the time for our work, and we have significantly less financial resources than a university. Just saying. But like you won't be able to accommodate everyone, but you can take away the burden from enough people that the people who do, like you can focus your resources on the people who actually need extra accommodations and make sure that they're taken care of.
Okay, should we end on a more positive note? Like, what is the, I came down hard on people, so how do we want to end our session? Let's just say like one productive thing you can do for a disabled colleague right now after watching this video. So I'm going to say check in with them in a clear way, not just saying like, how are you? Maybe saying, I know you're not doing well because of the, fascist election, the current pandemic, and the way the world is right now. I just want to let you know that like these are some things, concrete things I can do for you. Send a letter, right? Like send a box of nice things. I can review your research and edit for you, right? Like offer some concrete tasks that you feel comfortable providing as an ally.
I mean, after you watch this video, I hope that you send this video to everyone that's relevant. So like if that means to your PI, if that means to all the people in your lab or in your cohort, or if that means like the disability services office, like I'm gonna put in a plug. We here as DIS in grad school will consult for you. We will help you. We will help you do better. And so like send it to your disability services office. If they're like, great, these people sound like they have so many cool ideas, have them email us, have them message us on Twitter, like we will help. But so like the only way that people can do better is if you like send them this information. So retweet our tweet that has this a video link in it, email it to people, follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. Yeah, basically just like make us internet famous.
Easy.
I don't know how to top that, actually.
All right.
Let's go with a really simple one. It's just normalize asking what people need. Like you don't need to be disabled to want certain things. You could just be tired and you're like, I just want to sit down. So can we move this conversation to a not loud couch or something? We really need that shirt. I really
quiet couch.
I really want that shirt. But yeah, just ask. Be like, or if you're a PI, that could be like the first conversation you have with all of your students, being like, how can I help you be the best scientist, researcher, whatever that you want to be? And how can I help you through your academic journey? Easy, simple. Yeah. Go for it.
Like you covered all the things that I wanted to cover. Yeah, I guess, so yeah, kind of going off of that of, asking what people need, but then believing what they tell you, even if you don't understand how what they're asking for could possibly connect to what you know about them. Mm-hmm. You probably don't know all of the details of our lives or how disability affects us or how other things going on in our life can sort of interact with those disabilities. So even if, the suggestion we have for how something could be more successful seems confusing or you don't see the connection, trust that there's a reason for it, and don't necessarily try to equate different life experiences for why someone might need something.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you to all of our viewers for joining us in this first video log. Hopefully there will be more to come.